Get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, you saw the title. What is going on with Mark Zuckerberg? Did he have a come to Jesus moment, or did he have a running away from Satan moment? What do you guys think's going on right now? This is very interesting. If you don't know, he has admitted to colluding with the Biden-Harris administration to censor, his words, millions of Americans, and his words, he regrets the colluding. He used the word colluding. This is very interesting. He did not make a video about this. He made a letter about this. We're going to be covering some stuff in this video. So first off, we're going to have Patrick Bet-David just read this stuff off. Then we're going to have Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan talked to Mark Zuckerberg about the Hunter Biden laptop. And Mark Zuckerberg was very open about the involvement with the FBI and them communicating and all of that. And that was kind of the first shaking of everybody, where they were like, whoa, this guy's admitting it. You know, it was very odd. But then we have some other stuff to go through as well. Ted Cruz, Mark Zuckerberg speaking. And Mark Zuckerberg, as far as I can see, lies under oath in this video with what we know now. And then we have another one. And again, I'll say allegedly. Let me just cover myself. And then we have Mayorkas as well, speaking about this very topic, censorship. And correct me if I'm wrong. Is this guy not lying under oath as well? And then we have a clip of Vivek pretty much talking about a secret conversation he had with Mark Zuckerberg, revealing that he kind of pushed Mark Zuckerberg to do exactly what you're about to hear he did in this letter. And then we have Michael Schellenberger talking with Joe Rogan, talking about when all of this started. Let's get right into it. Let's start with Patrick Bet-David and hear this letter. Let's go.
Meta. Okay, so it's to the Honorable Jim Jordan, Chairman, Committee on the Judiciary. And then he says, Chairman Jordan, I appreciate the committee's interest in content moderation on online platforms. As you are aware, Meta has produced thousands of documents as part of your investigation and made a dozen employees available for transcribed interviews. Further to our cooperation with your investigation, I welcome the opportunity to share what I've taken away from this process. There's a lot of talks right now around how the U.S. government interacts with companies like Meta, and I want to be clear about our position, our platform. Our platforms are for everyone. We're about promoting speech and helping people connect in a safe and secure way. As part of this, we regularly hear from governments around the world and others with various concerns around public discourse and public safety. Okay, we're good so far. In 2021, senior officials from Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, and expressed a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take content down, and we own our decisions, including COVID-19 related changes we made to our enforcement in the wake of this pressure. I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret that we were not more outspoken about it. So he mans up and takes responsibility for it, right? The fact that, look, they forced us, but we could have said no, but we said yes. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at the time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to pressure from any administration in either direction, and we're ready to push back if something like this happens again. In a separate situation, the FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the leads up to the 2020 election. That fall, when we saw a New York Post story, we all remember this story, reporting on corruption allegations, including then Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden's family. Guys, this is pretty bad. I mean, it doesn't get worse than this. We sent that story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it while waiting for a reply. It's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation. And in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story. We've changed our policy and processes to make sure this doesn't happen again. For instance, we no longer temporarily demote things in the U.S. while waiting for fact checkers. Rob, if you can go to the next story. Zoom in a little bit more. There you go. Apart from this content moderation, I want to address the contributions I made during the last presidential cycle to support electoral infrastructure. The idea was here to make sure local elections jurisdictions across the country had the resources they needed to help people vote safely during a global pandemic. I made these contributions through the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. They were designed to be nonpartisan. Of course, they were partisan, spread across urban, rural, and suburban communities. Still, Despite the analysis have shown otherwise, I know that some people believe this work benefited only one party over the other. My goal is to be neutral and not play a role one way or another, or even to appear to be playing a role. So I don't plan on making a similar contribution this cycle. So Rob, go back to the tweet, and then Tom, I'm going to go to you first. Here's what I said. I said, so Zuckerberg just admitted to working with Biden-Harris administration to censor Americans. He's either admitting to this because he's being honorable, he's done with the Democratic Party, or he's getting ahead of a whistleblower. Either way, this is a very hard letter for him to write. Tom, your thoughts on the story?
Well, I think he's getting ahead of a whistleblower because I think there's going to be people that testify because there's going to be hearings. Trump wins, there is going to be hearings, and he knows it. How does he know? Well, words talk, numbers scream. And if you're Zuck, how do you scream? You scream with lobbyists. Rob, you have that chart real quick? So lobbying is how he talks to the government, and then he knows what's going on. He hears from people. Take a look at this. The social media people, which is Meta, ByteDance, which is our good friends at TikTok, right? X, Discord, and Snap. This is what they all spend. And if you take a look, Snap, Discord, and X, they hardly spend anything, not even 8% of it. The majority is ByteDance and Meta. Of the $30 million it's spent, look at that blue bar. Meta spends by far the most. Of 142 registered lobbyists in social media, Meta has 71.
Get out of here, 50%.
50% of them. ByteDance is 45. And X, Discord, and Snap, they only have 25, with Snap and Discord having 17. So that means that Elon's got 8 lobbyists, like 11%.
How do you process that?
I process it is that Zuck is writing this to us, to Jim Jordan, who is going to chair the hearings. He knows what's coming, and he has the lobbyists up there that they have their ears on the ground. Lobbyists don't only talk to our elected officials, they listen to them. And I think Zuck knows exactly what's going on. There are stories out there and there are statistics out there that Instagram had and still has
Wow. Jeez. I let that run a little long. Sorry about that, guys. If you just want to get right to the Rogan stuff, blah, blah, blah. But there you go. That is what he said. He's admitting to actually colluding with the Biden-Harris campaign. This is not going to be good for Biden. This is not going to be good for Harris going forward as she's running for president. Very interesting stuff. Right now, we're going to jump over to what Joe Rogan actually said, or what Mark Zuckerberg actually said to Joe Rogan. So this is all, now that we know, the cat's out of the bag, and listen, I understand this is what a lot of people already knew, quote unquote, but when you hear it from this gentleman that's on the screen right here, it hits a little different. That's exactly why this clip was so impactful when Joe Rogan interviewed Mark Zuckerberg. Check this out.
Vested in one individual. So I think one of the things that our country and our government gets right is the separation of powers. So one of the things that I tried to create is we created this oversight board. It's an independent board that basically we appointed people whose kind of paramount value is free expression, but they also balance that with things like when is there going to be real harm to others in terms of safety or privacy or other human rights issues. And basically that board, people in our community can appeal cases to when they think that we got it wrong, and that board actually gets to make the final binding decision, not us. So in a way, I actually think that is a more legitimate form of governance than having just a team internally that makes these decisions, or maybe some of them go up to me, although I don't spend a ton of my time on this on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's generally good to have some kind of separation of powers where you're architecting the governance so that way you have different stakeholders and different people who can make these decisions, and it's not just like one private company that's making decisions even about what just happens on our platform.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story, the New York Post.
Yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
When you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper political issue. So depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's a very professional law enforcement, they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Did they specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
When something like that turns out to be real, is there regret for not having it evenly distributed and for throttling the distribution of that story?
What do you mean evenly distributed?
I mean evenly in that it's not suppressed. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it turned out after the fact. The fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false, right? So basically, it had this period where it was getting less distribution. So yeah. I mean, but I think I think it sucks though. I think in the same way that probably having to go through a criminal trial but being proven innocent in the end sucks. It still sucks to have that you had to go through a criminal trial, but at the end you're free. So I don't know if the answer would have been don't do anything or don't have any process. I think the process was pretty reasonable. We still let people share it, but obviously you don't want situations like that.
Let people share it, but then made sure to censor those people. So you could share it, but we're just going to throttle you down to basically nothing so no one actually sees it. And I'm not just speaking. That's what he said. He said he demoted it. So if you're sharing something that's been demoted, this is how it works. And this is I've felt this happen myself. If you're sharing something that's demoted or speaking about someone that's been deplatformed, they will look at you as though you are that person. And they will just not deplatform you, but just switch you off. Just be like, no one's going to hear what this person has to say. So that's obviously what Facebook ended up doing. Wild. At this point in time, given what we know from what Patrick Bet-David was just saying, this is him admitting one part because the laptop came out as being very real. That was the part that he had to admit. But still, there's just a little something missing, right? He didn't admit anything. Now, this was during the Trump administration. Was this during? Yes, this was during the Trump administration right here. Not trying to drag him through the mud or anything, but what he's saying at this point in time is false. This is very interesting. And we all know who he's communicating with because he made it very clear in that last clip. And then he also made it clear in the letter. So we're talking about the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, and then we're talking about the FBI. And then he's saying stuff like this throughout the whole thing.
Your testimony says it is not enough that we just connect people. We have to make sure those connections are positive. It says we have to make sure people aren't using their voice to hurt people or spread misinformation. We have a responsibility not just to build tools, to make sure those tools are used for good. Mr. Zuckerberg, do you feel it's your responsibility to assess users whether they are good and positive connections or ones that those 15 to 20,000 people deem unacceptable or deplorable?
Senator, you're asking about me personally?
Facebook.
Senator, I think that there are a number of things that we would all agree are clearly bad. Foreign interference in our elections, terrorism, self-harm.
I'm
Those
talking
are
about
things.
Censorship.
Oh, well, I think that you would probably agree that we should remove terrorist propaganda from the service. So that, I agree, I think is clearly bad activity that we want to get down, and we're generally proud of how well we do at that. Yeah. Now, what I can say, and I do want to get this in before the end here, is that I'm very committed to making sure that Facebook is a platform for all ideas. that is a very important founding principle of what we do. We're proud of the discourse and the different ideas that people can share on the service. And that is something that, as long as I'm running the company, I'm going to be committed to making sure is the case.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, man. Thanks. Thanks. Bang up job, I have to say. This also shows a little something here. During Trump's administration, so he's already admitted to colluding with the Biden-Harris administration, right? And then when we talk about the laptop theory, fact, back when it was a theory, that was during Trump's administration. So there was a time before the Biden-Harris administration and that colluding started that this agency that reached out to Mark was, I don't want to say backdooring Trump, but kind of overriding him. I would think they didn't check in with Trump about this at all, because Trump would have been like, what happened? Hunter who? He would have been like, let me see you guys, because they had it in this December 2019. They had it, maybe even earlier than that. So at one point, I'm just going to say it flat out, Trump was getting backdoored. And then when another admin came in, then it was like, okay, well, hey, since we know you guys are cool, we'll tell you what we've been doing. And they were like, great, let's keep doing that. And they were like, just about Hunter? And he was like, no, everybody, let's go. Let's just censor millions of Americans. Interesting stuff. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? This is a little longer clip, but it's Josh Hawley giving it to Mayorkas. Now, given what we know, he's lying, isn't he? Maybe I'm wrong. Allegedly. We'll just say allegedly. Let me just play the clip.
Earlier this year that you disbanded the Disinformation Governance Board, which I thought was totally unconstitutional, but that turns out to be at best misleading. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what you're doing. Your own quadrennial review, which was just reported in the press, says that disinformation is going to be the new focus at DHS. The Quad Review says that DHS plans to target, I'm quoting now, inaccurate information domestically on a wide array of subjects, including, quoting, the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccine, racial justice, U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the nature of U.S. support for Ukraine. This is what you're devoting your agency's resources to. So I guess my first question is an American citizen who criticizes COVID mandates now to be treated as a domestic terrorist?
Of course not, and I'd like to say three things since you have three inaccuracies in the question you posed to me. Number one, border security is a priority of ours. Number two, the department does not censor speech. And number three, we did not publish a quadrennial review.
Does it exist, the quadrennial review?
I believe it is being worked on.
Well, it's been published in the media. Will you make it public?
When it is final, it will be public.
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I'd like to enter this article called "The Truth Cops," published in The Intercept. Here's my question then. If you're not censoring speech and if you're not treating Americans as domestic terrorists, then why is it that you're pressuring big tech to treat American citizens as if they're threats to the homeland? Why are you pressuring them to censor speech? Let's take a look at some new documents that have come to light that show what your administration is doing, this administration is doing to censor speech. Let's take a look at this email from July 16th, 2021. It's over my shoulder here. Facebook emailing HHS saying, I know our teams met today to better understand the scope of what the White House expects from us on misinformation going forward. Are you familiar with that email?
No.
Let's try another one.
And if I should...
How about, hold on. We'll get to that. But you're not familiar with this. All right. Let's try a different one. Here's one from July 20th, 2021. The White House emails Facebook saying, any way we can get this pulled down. 46 seconds later, Facebook responds, yep, we're on it. Are you familiar with that email?
No.
Okay. How about this one? July 23rd, 2021. Facebook employee writes to HHS, says, "Thank you for taking the time to meet today. Wanted to make sure you saw the steps we took just this past week to adjust policies and what we are removing with respect to misinformation." Are you familiar with that one?
Senator, we do not instruct.
Just yes or no.
No, because I'm the Secretary of DHS.
Well, I'm asking you that because it's funny you say that. A federal judge has just found as a finding of fact, Mr. Secretary, that your office, and I'm going to quote now, is supervising the nerve center of federally directed censorship. It's a federal judge in a federal lawsuit. You are supervising the nerve center of federally directed censorship. Here's another email, August 20th, 2021. Facebook writes again to HHS and highlights that Facebook is increasing the strength of our demotions for COVID and vaccine-related content. April 16th, 2021, Rob Flaherty at the White House circulates a Zoom meeting invitation to Twitter employees stating White House staff will be briefed by Twitter on vaccine misinformation. We have example after example of this administration coordinated, apparently, according to a federal court, by your agency, pressuring, coercing social media companies to engage in censorship. Is that constitutional?
That is unequivocally false.
Is what the emails show.
It is unequivocally false, Senator.
You are not pressuring the big tech companies to take down accounts. You are not meeting with them to ask them to censor on your behalf.
That is correct. We are not.
You're not having any meetings with them whatsoever.
We meet with the tech companies.
How often?
To address the Homeland Security mission.
How often do you meet with them?
For example, online child sexual exploitation is a scourge in this country, and we have an obligation to address it.
You're saying that no one in your office has ever met with, coordinated, or otherwise engaged in any contact with a social media company in which you spoke to them about vaccine mandates, about COVID mask mandates, about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, about the current U.S. involvement in Ukraine. None of that has ever happened.
I don't know what you're referring to, Senator, and I can
read the emails.
And I can tell you this. Well, you've actually cited emails outside of our department, but if
I've cited a federal judge who says your department is engaged in supervising the nerve center of federally directed censorship. Here's my point, Mr. Secretary. It has been established for years in this country, as you very well know because you're a lawyer, that the federal government may not use private third parties to engage in activities that are unconstitutional. That's exactly what you and this administration are doing. You are leveraging private companies to carry out censorship on your behalf. It's dystopian, but worse than that, it's unconstitutional.
It's also false.
It's also false. But then when you take in what Mark Zuckerberg said, isn't it true? Am I off on this? You know, this was 2022, right? Mark Zuckerberg is saying this has been going on since 2020. So he's admitting that there was a collusion. He's saying that there's none. He's saying that there was pressure from, you know, the whole administration. He's saying there was none. I don't know. Maybe I'm off on that. But Mark Zuckerberg just opened up a whole can of worms. There are definitely going to be hearings because of this. And this might be the point where a hearing actually does something. I know I've played a lot of these clips before, and it always feels like, I've heard people in the comments echo the same sentiment, it always feels like lip service. You know, they yell at Mark Zuckerberg for a while. You know, he says, I'm sorry, he apologizes to families behind him, and you never see anything happen. I feel like this time we might see something happen, because usually everybody who's at this hearing, or everybody who's been subpoenaed to come in or asked to come in, however it happens, you know, sometimes they're subpoenaed, sometimes they just come without the subpoena. Head of Secret Service had to be subpoenaed. She would not just come in. But they're usually all on the same page. Now we have a hearing where Mark Zuckerberg is going to be saying, this is what happened. And there are going to be other people saying no. And then Mark Zuckerberg possibly will be supplying proof. Is that what's going to happen? Are there going to be a Facebook files like there were a Twitter files? If so, this is absolutely wild. Now, what could have prompted Mark Zuckerberg to do something like this? Well, very interesting. Vivek talks about a conversation that he had with Mark Zuckerberg. It's on the right speed. I want to play this for you guys right now because it's a very interesting conversation that they had. And it was just 2 months later that Mark Zuckerberg writes this letter, almost 2 months to the day. Let's get into it.
Related to law. I think in the private sector, there's room for some level of leadership here where people owning this through honesty, I think, would go a long way. So I was at the UFC 300 fight this last weekend. Great day, by the way. A lot of good fights that day. But I was sitting right up there, cage side, and Mark Zuckerberg was there too. So we had a chat in between some of the fights. He's into fighting, and yeah, whatever. I'll just spill the beans and share what we talked about. But yeah, he was telling me something to the effect of he's really into MMA, and so he said, we've become so neutered as a country, right? Why shouldn't we just embrace that we have these human instincts? I've grown to like MMA quite a bit. So I was like, yeah, I agree with you. Okay, we're all sitting here watching UFC and talking about how great it is to watch UFC, and we've become neutered as a country. I said, well, what about that with respect to speech? How do you feel about that? And then he kind of paused for a second. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I think you'd actually make the same argument for just saying that you get to say what you want in this country. We've become too neutered by trying to have central moderators of who decides what you can and can't say. And, his response was, well, look, I'm actually a lot more pro-free speech than people might know. And I've actually known a lot of his own tendencies. I believe that's actually probably true. It's about bending the knee and buckling to pressure. And so what I told him, and he said he would think about it, is, hey, listen, man, I think you could actually do a service to this country if you just came out, if it was in your heart, if you actually meant it, if you say you're pro-free speech and you actually mean it, to just say, hey, I screwed up. You know what? Locking Donald Trump out of an account, a major president of the United States and now presidential candidate, to say that the decision to silence somebody and suppress them, even if I agree or disagree with what they had to say, was making the decision under pressure, under forces of pressure where a lot of people were buckling to outside pressure. We become neutered as a country, and all of us are subject to that kind of pressure, and some of us screwed up, and I screwed up. And if I were to make that same decision again, I wouldn't make the same decision. If you said that, I think that would have a therapeutic effect on the country. That's a form of accountability. The best kind of accountability is where you actually own it for yourself. And I think people in this country, I think it's part of our human nature. There's a part of us that wants vengeance, but there's also part of us that is hungry to forgive, actually. I think that that's one of the Christian values that the nation was founded on. It's a founding value of Judeo-Christian value. It's a founding value of this country. It's a value of many faiths across the world. It's something in our nature that opens our heart to forgiveness, but it requires somebody who deserves to be held accountable to be the first person to hold themselves accountable if they're that person. I think that goes a long distance too. And so if a guy like Mark Zuckerberg, that was the extent of our conversation. I think he left it off saying he'd think about it. Huh? That's where it ended. Yeah, that is definitely where it ended.
Weird.
But whether it's a member of the press at CNN, whether it's a guy who leads a large platform like Meta, whether it's a U.S. president, even if it's not Donald Trump saying I screwed up, but we screwed up as a country. And we're talking together, leading this entire nation, that we as a federal government have screwed up for the last 20 years. And I'm saying this not to blame somebody else, but I'm saying this on behalf of the government of the United States to apologize to the people of the systematic lies that we have told you. Not me as an individual, but we as leaders of this country have told you for the last 20 years. But I'm saying it with the goal of saying we want to turn the page and move on as one nation under God. That's a separate discussion for another day. I think the four-letterization of God in our culture, I think, is something that has left people hungry for purpose too.
Man, what a great speaker. I gotta say, every time I hear this guy, I'm like, you sure this guy shouldn't be the VP? Are you sure? I don't know. He's pretty good. JD Vance is a beast too, I gotta admit. It makes perfect sense that these two are friends because they know exactly what to say when they're dealing with mainstream media. And it's great to see. But that was a conversation that he had with Mark Zuckerberg. If you notice, in that letter that Mark Zuckerberg had, he even said exactly what Vivek said. What Vivek said, he said to Zuckerberg, which is own it. And Mark Zuckerberg said in the letter, we own our decisions. We own what we did. It's very, very interesting, And of course, there is still the theory of a whistleblower coming forward and he's trying to get ahead of that. That does make perfect sense as well. But I don't know. Mark Zuckerberg, he just recently came forward saying when he saw Trump raise his fist, it was truly inspiring. It was the most American thing he's seen, you know, like he came out that way. You know, July 4th, he was holding an American flag and surfing, drinking a beer, you know, some real white boy summer type of stuff, which I love to see, absolutely love to see. And you know, he's just been, you know, jujitsu. He's been fighting. He's talking to Vivek about being neutered as a country. You know, he's saying that he's pro free speech. Vivek saying that he could see the fact that he's pro free speech. Now, obviously, we're all gonna argue that because, you know, if we all got Facebook accounts and, you know, some of us have felt firsthand that it doesn't feel that true. Although we've never had face-to-face conversations with the man, maybe he feels different than the way his company acts towards free speech. That's for another conversation, you know, if I ever get to talk to him. I don't know. But yeah, very interesting. So Vivek might have just pushed him over the edge, as well as a whistleblower. Maybe everything was just coming to a head and he was just like, I have to do something. I have to say something. And maybe it was weighing on him as well. Maybe he realized when he saw Trump take that shot that he was like, oh, I did severely the wrong thing. And this man could have been finishing up his 8th year as president if I had not listened and let that story just ride the way it needed to ride because it was true. Maybe he's having a realization, you know, now in that letter, he's saying, I don't want to play that same role, you know, he's like, respectfully. I don't know, man. It's very, very interesting. And honestly, maybe there is a whistleblower. Still the fact, I haven't seen this whistleblower, right? If a whistleblower comes out now, confirmed. But for right now, as it stands, it looks very noble what he did. Very, very noble, you know? And it's still terrible what he did because millions of people, I still have the suggestion of let us know who you censored. The same way Jim Jordan actually let us know who was censored via X. He released a whole document. If you actually search Jim Jordan, Twitter files, censored document. If you search that on X, the tweet he put out, he attached the PDF. It shows every single account that was censored. Facebook should do something very similar as well. But we'll see. I don't know. CEO whistleblower Mark Zuckerberg whistleblows on himself. Now, this is Michael Schellenberger talking with Joe Rogan once again, and he's talking about when all of this actually started. Listen to this.
Do we know when this began? Like, when did they infiltrate these organizations? Because I'm sure it's not just Twitter, right? I'm sure it's...
Oh, no, absolutely not. That's part of what was so terrifying is that it was all of the social media companies, including Wikipedia, by the way, which we don't talk enough about, but also all of the mainstream news organizations are all being organized. So when does it start? You know, it really, what you're looking at is the apparatus that was created by the war on terror over the last 20 years, starting after 9/11. Then there was a battle against ISIS because ISIS was successfully recruiting on social media. So there was sort of a counter-ISIS recruiting campaign that occurred. Then you get the big event is Brexit 2016, Trump's election in 2016, and the establishment just freaks out, absolutely freaks out. And there's a lot of different motivations here. So one of the motivations is just to blame Facebook, blame social media for Trump's victory. It was never true. I don't really think anybody really believed it. There's just, you know, there was just, for a variety of reasons we can talk about, there was never any good evidence that whatever Russians did had much of any influence, any measurable influence on the outcome of the campaign. But they started to scapegoat the social media companies as a way to get control over them. And so then in 2017, they set up, well, two things happen, or many things happen. The Department of Homeland Security just declares election infrastructure to be part of their mission of protecting election infrastructure, and that meant protecting the media environment. Protect. Put that in quotes. You know, yeah. It's creepy. It's patronizing. It's a power move. So that's the first thing that happens. They create something called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security to supposedly protect the media environment from foreign influence. They create something called the Foreign Influence Task Force with the FBI to basically start policing domestic speech on these platforms. They start organizing all the social media companies to participate in these meetings.
Interesting. And you know what? You can't be too surprised because you can't possibly think that Trump getting elected was only waking up the people. I think it sent shockwaves through everybody. Politicians, regular people, left, right, black, white, everybody was for better or for worse was like, what just happened? You know, whether you were mad about it or you were really happy about it, can't be surprised that that also these agencies and people also woke up a little bit and said we have to put everything into hyperdrive. Very interesting stuff, man. So Joe Rogan definitely, in my opinion, plays a role in Mark Zuckerberg coming out with this whole thing. You know, that was the first little, you know, nipping at him. Then he has to sit in front of Congress and he's kind of realizing, oh, this is getting serious, and I'm not exactly telling the truth. I can say that I don't know certain things, and, you know, and then all of a sudden this conversation with Vivek, he's seeing Trump almost get assassinated. He's talking with Vivek and he's just realizing, you know, I need a MAGA hat. Maybe that I'm kidding. But I don't know. He had some kind of realization. So like I said at the beginning, is he coming to Jesus or is he running from Satan? Is he running from what he's known he's done year after year to millions of Americans and otherwise? Or, you know, is he realizing that he needs to stand up for free speech in a way that's never been done before by any CEO aside from Elon Musk? But he is one of the big veteran tech CEOs actually standing up saying that he did actually collude. It is absolutely wild in my opinion. And just so you guys know, anything that you see me talk about, like this clip here, if you follow me on X, I repost everything that I end up using in a video. So I always repost it. So if you jump on my page, you'll see a bunch of things reposted. Has to do with the videos from this channel and my secondary channel. So you'll be able to see the whole thread because there's,
you know, I was sort of
the easy there, Mike. There is a whole thread. So just wanted to let you guys know that, but we're going to wrap this up. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole thing by Mark Zuckerberg. And if you want to read that letter for yourself, once again, it'll be reposted on my X page. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Other than that, I'm out.